This episode is brought to you by Toad Ranch. Toad Ranch specializes in designing and building premium reptile habitats for everyone from dedicated hobbyists to zoos, nature centers, and other professional institutions. Known for their exceptional craftsmanship, fully customizable design, and unmatched attention to detail, Toad Ranch has become one of the most trusted names in reptile enclosures. Whether you're housing a single pet or an entire collection, Toad Ranch creates habitats that are built to last and designed with both keeper and animal in mind. And for listeners of the podcast, Toad Ranch is offering a special discount for a limited time. Use promo code SSP15 at checkout to receive 15% off all destination backgrounds and baskin hides. If you've been thinking of upgrading your enclosure, now is the perfect time to do it. That's SSP15 for 15% off destination backgrounds and baskin hides only at Toad Ranch. The sea is calm. The kind of calm that makes experienced sailors nervous. It's just before sunrise, somewhere in the Lesser Sunda Islands of Indonesia. The year is 1905. The sky is still dark enough that the stars hang overhead, but the horizon has begun to glow with a faint ribbon of orange. A small wooden prahu drifts quietly toward shore, its hull creaking with every gentle swell. A handful of pearl divers prepare their equipment in silence. No one talks much this early. They've made this trip dozens of times before. The reefs here are rich. The waters are warm, and if luck is on their side, they'll return with enough pearls to feed their families for months. But everyone aboard knows one rule. Never wander too far inland. Not because of pirates, not because of snakes, but because of dragons. The older fishermen don't laugh when they say it. They don't smile. They don't tell the story like it's folklore meant to entertain children around a fire. They say it the way people speak about storms or earthquakes, something real that demands respect. A creature longer than two grown men, a tongue that flicks through the air like a living flame, and a bite that means death. The young divers roll their eyes. They've heard stories like this their whole lives. Old men always exaggerate. Every island has monsters, and every sailor has a ghost story. The captain simply points towards the dense green hills rising beyond the beach. If you value your life, he says quietly, be back before the sun is high. The boats anchor. One by one, the divers disappear beneath the crystal clear water. Hours pass, and the tide changes. Baskets slowly fill with oysters. The morning is almost over when one of the younger men notices something strange. The jungle has gone quiet. No birds, no monkeys, just silence. Then, a deer bursts from the trees. It isn't running, it's fleeing. Its eyes are wide with panic. Blood runs down one of its hind legs as it crashes across the beach, kicking up sand before disappearing back into the brush on the opposite side. The divers stop working. Something made that deer run. Something big. A moment later they hear it. Heavy footsteps. Not hurried, deliberate. Like something that knows it has nothing to fear. The bushes begin to shake. Branches snap. Then it steps into the sunlight. At first, no one moves. Their minds refuse to accept what they're seeing. It's a lizard, but no lizard should be this large. Its body stretches nearly 10 feet from nose to tail. Its scales shimmer with shades of gray and bronze beneath the tropical sun. Its legs are thick with muscle. Its claws dig into the sand like hook knives. Its head slowly sways from side to side. Then comes the tongue, long and forked like a snake, flicking through the air over and over as though tasting every scent carried by the breeze. This dragon doesn't roar. It doesn't need to. It simply walks toward the wounded deer trail with complete confidence, as if on the island nothing has ever challenged it. The men stare in silence. One diver whispers a prayer. Another grips a spear so tightly his knuckles turn white. The oldest man in the group doesn't even look surprised. The dragon reaches the blood-stained sand. Its tongue flicks once, twice, 3 times, then it turns. Not towards the deer, but towards the men. Every heartbeat suddenly feels loud. The animal raises its head, watching, studying. No fear, no hesitation. For what feels like an eternity, nobody breathes. Then, just as suddenly as it appears, the giant monitor turns back toward the jungle. Its tail drags a winding groove through the sand as it disappears beneath the trees. Only then do the men remember how to breathe. Back at the harbor that evening, they tell everyone what happened. They describe the size, the claws, the tongue, the way it moved with confidence of an ancient predator. The older villagers nod. Of course, they've always known. But when the story eventually reaches colonial officials, and then scientists in Europe, the reaction is very different. Impossible. A lizard that large? Nonsense. Surely frightened pearl divers had mistaken a crocodile, or perhaps the tropical heat had helped their imaginations along. After all, the world had already been mapped. Surely no one would have overlooked a predator the size of a crocodile. Newspapers dismissed the tales. Naturalists scoffed, and educated men sitting thousands of miles away laughed at stories told by the people who had spent their entire lives on those islands. Another sailor's tale, another jungle myth, another dragon that never existed. But here's the remarkable thing. The divers weren't lying. The fishermen weren't exaggerating. And the villagers weren't passing down fantasy. They were describing one of the most extraordinary reptiles on Earth. And within just a few years, a package would arrive on the desk of Dutch zoologist named Peter Owens. Inside were photographs, enough evidence to force the scientific world to confront an astonishing truth. The dragon was real. It was not a beast that breathed fire, and not a monster that crushed ships beneath its tail. Something far more incredible. A giant prehistoric predator that had survived the 20th century, hidden on a handful of remote islands in Indonesia, while the rest of the world insisted it couldn't possibly exist. Sometimes, the greatest legends aren't born from imagination. Sometimes, they're simply waiting for someone to believe. Hi, and welcome into episode 4 of the Scutes and Scales podcast. I'm your host, Channing Guest, and joined by our other host, Luke Daniel. How are you doing today, Luke?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. Well, today is an episode that I am very, very excited for, and I know you are as well. This is one of those episodes that when we were talking about the idea for this show, it was one that I was particularly interested in. I thought would be really cool because we were talking about the dragons of Komodo Island. So we want to get right into it and talk about first the legends of dragons, because Komodo dragons may be an animal that live today that bear that name dragon, like many animals do, but almost every culture has some sort of history and legend of dragon. And when we say dragon, what are we actually talking about in this context? Because we're going to talk about some dragons that are not just the living animals today, but they mean a lot of different things when you say dragon. Because depending on where you were born, a dragon could be a monster, a god, a protector, a symbol of your country, or a real animal. And what's interesting to me is the origin of the word dragon actually first appeared in the 13th century. It was basically a mashup of a Latin and Greek word, but it was mostly associated with snakes. So it wasn't this giant mythical creature we think of today, but dragons kind of have been made into a little bit of everything. So we're going to talk about a couple of different legends of those, but I think you had one that you wanted to start us off with, and then we'll go into some other ones.
Yeah, one that I was pretty passionate about. I mean, to my knowledge, at least, maybe one of the oldest legends we have about a dragon. Actually, it stems back to biblical times. If we take a look at the book of Job in chapter 41, we actually get a description of a pretty crazy sounding dragon called Leviathan. It says, his rows of scales are his pride, shut up tightly as with a seal. One is so near another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They stick together and cannot be parted. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lights. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke goes out of his nostrils, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. Strength dwells in his back, and sorrow dances before him. The folds of his flesh are joined together. They are firm on him and cannot be moved. And we just get even more stories from there, don't we?
Yeah, so that one I think is a really impressive picture that kind of paints almost like this adversary is what it kind of seems like, is just this impenetrable force is kind of the idea that you get from that legend or from that story of a dragon, which I think is really cool. But I mean, every culture for the most part has a legend of dragons. I mean, when you look at like the United States specifically, there are stories of dragons. They're a little bit differently, but they weren't like super notable necessarily, but I did set aside 4 different countries that kind of have different legends other than the one of like that our main story takes place. So the first legend that we have specifically is China, and it's the dragon of water and power is kind of the idea of the Chinese dragon. I know China has lots of different legends associated with like different dragons and things like that, but this is the one that kind of stuck out to me. It was basically Chinese dragons are generally not fire-breathing monsters we're familiar with in Western stories. They're powerful supernatural beings associated with water, rain, rivers, weather, fertility, and good fortune. And historically became symbols of imperial power and authority. Unlike many Western dragons, Chinese dragons were often viewed as benevolent or protective. So when you look at like kind of what it mentions there, the idea of the Western dragon, there's a little bit more of like the adversarial dragon, and so these were more viewed as like protective animals and like good luck and things like that. Another one I thought was, or sorry,
I was going to say one thing I wanted to mention as far as your term of Western, that doesn't only apply with some of those legends pertaining to the New World. When you say Western, a lot of those legends also come from Europe, is something I think you'll get onto is a little bit there. It's not strictly a America's kind of deal that they breathe fire and whatnot.
Yeah. And then we have Greece, which is the dragon is a monster to defeat. Ancient Greek mythology has several creatures that fit the dragon archetype, including Ladon, the serpent-like guardian of golden apples, and Python, the enormous serpent associated with the Delphi. I hope I'm saying this right. But the Greek stories often portray these creatures as dangerous obstacles that heroes or gods must overcome, making the dragon more of a monster or guardian than a benevolent being. So they're viewed a little bit more in the Greek sense as something to conquer rather than viewed as, in the same way that the Chinese legend portrays them. Whales, I think, might be my favorite out of all of them. There's because I think it's the most classic dragon. I don't want to rush through these too quick, especially not this one, because I think this one's pretty neat. Because this is kind of like you get like your knights and stuff like that. Like that's when you think of like the knights fighting the dragon, this is kind of where that story comes from and where that idea like is viewed. So you've got the red dragon of Wales. I'm not even going to try and pronounce its name that they have in Wales for it. It became a powerful national symbol. In the famous legend, a red dragon and a white dragon battled beneath a king's fortress, with the red dragon ultimately defeating the white one. The struggle has traditionally been interpreted as representing the Welsh overcoming their enemies. And so you see, this is more of your classic, like, big 4-legged monster with wings that breathes fire, like that is more of like your classic dragon. When you say dragon, that's the first creature that's probably going to come to mind. And that is the traditional Welsh story there. This one I thought was pretty neat too, and I know we talked about this one pre-show a little bit, is the Mesoamerica legend, the Quetzalcoatl, which I wanted to call this the Quetzalcoatlus so bad when I first saw it. I was like, oh, they just like were talking about the Quetzalcoatlus. They must find like a fossil or something like that. But it's among the ancient civilizations of Mesoamerica, particularly the Aztecs and earlier cultures. Quetzalcoatl was a feathered serpent, a powerful deity associated with wind, learning, creation, and civilization. This is probably one of the most interesting contrasts to the European dragon, because the dragon is not a monster at all. It's a god and a creator figure in their legend. So I think that one's really neat. And also I think what's neat about it is this one is, even though it's called the Quetzalcoatl and not called a dragon, it is a lot more similar to the traditional original meaning of dragon. And this is a big serpent is kind of the idea of Quetzalcoatl. So I think that one is a particular story that I think is really neat there.
Yeah, it's one that I think is very interesting, especially given the alternate, or I guess other common name for it, of Cuckoo Khan. Especially since we see that I'm a huge Marvel fan personally, and we kind of get to see that legend interpreted into the second Black Panther movie, as they kind of give that title to Namor, the villain, and even in the movie they pay homage to it, giving him a feather. It's known as the feathered serpent god, and he has like a snake skull headdress in the movie with feathers coming off of it. I thought was a really nice callback to that legend in that movie.
And so I think these legends are all kind of neat because it paints a picture of like all the cultures having this idea of some mythical creature. And one thing that I think is very interesting to me is it's always been fascinating how every culture, for the most part, could have this story and this legend of a very similar creature.
Hmm.
And they oftentimes, kind of come about in a similar way. Is one of those ones that kind of raises like a question to me in my mind of like, why why does every culture come up with something like this?
Hmm.
Obviously we're not finding necessarily like fossils or bones or anything like that to prove that these animals necessarily existed in the traditional sense. But it's just always been very fascinating to me to think that like they do have pretty similar stories, and it just kind of makes me wonder where those stories originate from. And the cool thing is, like, some places do have pretty verifiable stories when it comes to them, such as Komodo Island. And their story definitely is a legend. It is not by any means like a true story. And it's not necessarily universally believed, but it is a story that it was kind of a traditional tale told
Hmm.
amongst the people on the Komodo Islands. And so you get the original people of the Komodo Islands were the Otomoto people. And the Otomoto people had a really cool
They
story.
protected the time stone, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The
Since we were talking
Otomoto,
about Marvel earlier, yeah,
the
the
Eye
Eye
of
of
Otomoto.
Agamotto.
Yeah, but the Otomoto people were, if not the original inhabitants, the most famous inhabitants that I could find of the Komodo Islands, and they have a really cool legend associated with specifically the Komodo dragon. I thought was really cool, and it's the Ora and Jerong story. And this is a really cool traditional story because the story basically is that a woman known as the Dragon Princess had twins. One was a human boy named Jerong, and I may be butchering that name, but it's spelled Gerong. So that's what I'm going with, Jerong. And the other was a dragon named Aura. The twins were separated as they grew up, and eventually Jerong encounters a large dragon while hunting. He is preparing to kill it when the dragon princess intervenes and reveals that the dragon is actually his sister. The Otomoto people have lived on the island for about 2,000 years now with Komodo dragons, and this is a story that is, even if it's not like necessarily believed as fact for them, it is a story that kind of paints the picture of their relationship with the Komodo dragon. The Otomoto traditionally view the Komodo dragon more as a kin rather than simply a dangerous animal, so they were treated with a lot of respect.
Mhm.
And so their oral tradition describes humans, Komodo dragons, as twins born from the same mother, like we discussed. And historically, the two shared the same forest, the same gardens, the same food, same resources. And in some accounts, people even go as far as to say that the Otomoto, when they hunted deer, they would even leave portions of the animals for the Komodo dragons. So they kind of had this like very respecting relationship. This was not a legend of like an animal that may or may not exist to them. This was a animal that they saw every single day. So the story kind of painted that relationship of the respect that they had for each other, and they lived by it. So I think that was a really cool thing, especially when you look at this gigantic animal that
Mhm.
could be very dangerous. Kind of the respect that they had for them, they treated them as sort of an equal is almost
Yeah.
what it comes across as. So I thought that was really cool. Um, but that obviously is like they were known about for a long time by the Otomoto people, but they weren't known about to the rest of the world. They were known about to like people from surrounding islands and stuff like that, as you'll hear in like the intro story that is read. Definitely some creative liberties in that, not necessarily basing it off of any one true story. But they were known about by surrounding islands and things like that, but they weren't known about as fact. It was kind of
Mhm.
told as like a story and a legend going back and forth between those people from the outside islands. And they weren't discovered by science by the rest of the world until a little bit later on. And you have some good information for us on that, don't you?
I do. I wanted to kind of touch on those legends about the Komodo dragon specifically, real quick,
Yeah.
before we move on to that. One is a common belief that the Komodo dragons serve as a connection between. Actually, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. In addition to the legend of the dragon princess, many locals in Flores, a nearby island, believe that the Komodo dragons are the spiritual guardians of their homeland. These magnificent reptiles are seen as protectors of the land, possessing mystical powers that allow them to ward off evil and bring good fortune to those who respect them. Um, we'll talk a little bit later about whether or not they bring good fortune to everybody.
Yeah.
But that's one thing. One common belief is that the Komodo dragons serve as a connection between the physical world and the spiritual realm. Locals have long believed that the dragons act as intermediaries, protecting the islands from harm and watching over the villagers. In some cases, it's said that the dragons can sense danger, whether it's a natural disaster or an attack on the village. Well, see if we can fix my camera there. There we go. And they act as a warning system, helping the people prepare and stay safe. It's actually pulled from a website called KomodoIslandTour.com, where you can book tours, guided tours to go hear these legends in person and see these dragons in person, which I think is pretty awesome. But like you were leading to there, that's a lot of stories. We get stories about dragons all around the world, but they were not like known solid proof to the whole wide world through science until I was going to say somewhat recently. I guess not anymore.
Yeah.
Way back, and I might make some people mad by saying way back, by saying back in 19. No, I'm just kidding. It's way back in 1910. A Dutch lieutenant. This is a mouthful, so bear with me. Jacques Carrel Henry van Stein van Hensbroek was stationed on Flores Island in eastern Indonesia within the Dutch colonial administration, where when he received words of a quote-unquote land crocodile, I think is actually the direct English translation from what the native people were calling it on that island, of unusually large size living on the nearby island of Komodo. Intrigued, he set out to Komodo to investigate for himself, which, can I just say, what a dude. I think there's a lot of people who, if they heard stories about giant land crocodiles running around, they'd be like, well, let me not go anywhere near that island then. But this guy, he was like,
even as a reptile person, like, I'd probably not go by myself.
No, I don't think he did. I assume he didn't either.
Yeah.
But what a dude, to say, oh, we got to see this.
Yeah. I'd be intrigued for sure, but I don't know if I'd be getting out of the boat.
And he found them. He actually returned with a photo and the skin of the animal. He killed one. I'm looking at the photo, a huge one. And took the picture next to it almost looks, it's kind of comical. It kind of reminds me of like when you see hunters posting their buck that they shot this opening day. He kind of looks like that in this photo. He skinned it. Let me find where I was reading. With a photo, he returned with the photo and skin of the animal, which he sent to Peter Owens, the director of Java Zoological Museum and Botanical Gardens. The animal was not a crocodile of any sort, but a large monitor lizard. Owens realized that this animal was new to science and published the first formal description of the animal, which we now know as Komodo dragon Varanus komodoensis. Took him a little bit. It was a couple years later, 1912, when that description came out. A little bit past that, kind of reading a little bit about the some context to that discovery. Although fossils of giant monitor lizards had been known since the mid-1800s, the discovery that giant lizards were still among us, albeit on a few isolated islands in faraway Southeast Asia, was met with fascination and excitement. Zoologists set out to collect more specimens, some of which were even brought back to Europe alive. The various aspects of their biology was studied. The discovery is even said to have been the inspiration behind the movie King Kong. We're doing lots of pop culture references tonight.
Which that one I thought was particularly interesting because there was a movie that came out in, I believe, 1960 called The Lost World: Journey to the Center of the Earth. And definitely not a movie that would be allowed to be made in today's time because of how they filmed it. But I thought it was pretty interesting because this is only, not even 50 years. It's 48 years after the first specimens, arrive of like Komodo dragons. And now, fortunately, they didn't use Komodo dragons in the movie, at least not to my knowledge. But only 48 years after the discovery of the Komodo dragon, they're making this movie and they're using monitor lizards to portray dinosaurs. I believe it was an Asian water monitor that they used in the movie. But they had an Asian water monitor dressed up as a dinosaur fighting, I believe, a caiman or a crocodile, also dressed up as a dinosaur. And they have them like fighting on this cliff's edge and then have them roll off the cliff's edge as like one of the dinosaur fight scenes. They also have scenes of rhinoceros iguanas dressed up as I think it was Dimetrodon is what they have. They have rhinoceros iguanas dressed up as Dimetrodon, like, marching around, kind of trying to portray like these animals. So it's just kind of neat, the old school Hollywood and kind of seeing those animals back then. Definitely not in a method that we would support. But they definitely weren't taking care of them. They couldn't exactly put the no animals were harmed in the making of this movie. In fact, that movie probably had a little bit to do with those rules being put into place because animals were definitely harmed in that. But it's kind of interesting seeing that they were like, hey, you know, why would we need to make dinosaur puppets? We can just slap a dinosaur costume on these guys, and they did fight. They legitimately fought each other in those
Oh
dinosaur
yeah.
costumes.
But
Um,
I mean, I know the Dutch scientist, old Mr. Peter Owens there, gave us a formal description back in 1912 of
yeah,
the Komodo dragons. But here in our show notes, why don't you go ahead and give it, or as I'm reading our show notes, why don't you go ahead and give us a pretty interesting description of our own
I'll
of a
give you
Komodo dragon?
my
There you
formal
go.
description
Yeah.
as if I were Peter Owens. So technically, it's just a monitor lizard, but like you said, a large monitor lizard. But I do think calling a Komodo dragon just a large monitor lizard is kind of like calling a Great Dane just a big dog. You
Mhm.
know, a lot more goes into it than that. It's correct, but it's leaving out a lot.
Maybe even stretch that, calling a wolf a big dog.
Yeah,
You're
I
technically
think
right.
that's a little bit closer. Yeah, like
But-
calling a wolf a big dog is technically correct, or a big canid. But these guys, they reach 10.3 feet long, which is not the longest monitor lizard in the world. You know, crocodile monitors, I believe, are the longest. Either them or Asian water monitors, they get a little bit longer, but they don't get nearly as heavy. These guys have reached almost 400 pounds. I mean, we're talking about this as it's a land crocodile, is what it is. Like that's humongous. That original description is not far off from
it's
what
an
this
apt
thing is.
description. Yeah.
Yeah, they're almost 400 pounds. What I think is really neat is that's full grown, but when these guys hatch out, they're like teeny. They're like 12 to 16 inches, somewhere in that range. And what's funny is the number one predator of baby Komodo dragons is other Komodo dragons. These guys hatch out of the egg. And I know we talk about like sea turtles being like storming the beaches of Normandy and their fight to get to the water. Komodo dragons might have it worse because at least sea turtles aren't fighting off their own relatives to get to the water. I mean, Komodo dragons hatch out of the nest, and there's another Komodo dragon picking them off, like right out of the egg. And it's easy pickings for the big Komodo dragons. They make a good meal. So when they hatch out, they're actually pretty slender, and they have a lot of pattern to them. They look very similar to Asian water monitors. And they spend a lot of time in the trees. They're almost 100% arboreal, just eating like small bugs and eggs and things like that from the trees on Komodo Island. So that's one thing that I thought was pretty neat. And we'll get into some of like the myths around this, but they're also a 10-foot, 400-pound venomous animal, like
Mm-hmm.
legitimately venomous animal. And like their venom isn't going to be something like a rattlesnake or a cobra or something like that, where it's going to have like super serious effects on you as far as like the bite. When you look at those animals, hold on, I'm getting to a point here. So it's getting to a point. It's that when a rattlesnake or a cobra or something like that bites you, the bite itself isn't really doing much damage to you. It's the venom that's causing massive tissue damage, organ
Mm-hmm.
failure, things like that, depending on the type of venom that they have. When a Komodo dragon bites you, it's even if there was no venom involved, that is a life-altering bite.
Okay, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, the size of
the
the
way
teeth.
you worded it, I was about to say, now hold on.
Yeah.
I would definitely describe a Komodo
Yeah.
dragon bite as medically significant.
Yes, the bite itself is life-altering. I mean, it is going to rip you to shreds. It's going to cut through tendons, scrape, probably get into bone and stuff like that. Not to get too graphic, but I mean, you're talking about a huge mouth with big teeth, really strong bite force, and they are going to bite, rip, and pull and just mess you up. That bite would ruin your day, and you're going to bleed prolifically from a bite from a Komodo dragon. But insult to injury, their venom has anticoagulant properties in it that make you bleed significantly worse. So when you get bit by a Komodo dragon, not only is it going to bleed from the sheer damage from the bite, but that anticoagulant venom is going to just really royally mess you up. And that's one of the biggest threats with getting bit by a Komodo dragon is you are incredibly likely to bleed out very rapidly. So it kind of paints this picture of this just massive war machine. I mean, this sounds like Weapon X.
I can enhance that picture.
Okay.
I can enhance that picture of their description and of a war machine and how awful this bite is they have, and I'm going to move my mic closer when I say this, they have iron in their flippin' teeth.
Okay.
Their teeth are serrated, very similar to, funny enough, when I was researching them, they say very similar to the teeth of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, just smaller.
Interesting.
And along the tips of those sharp teeth, there are little serrations like a steak knife And in those serrations and on those tips, if you look at some pictures very up close, I don't know if anybody's ever seen a picture of like a beaver skull or some other large
Yeah.
rodent that has the orange teeth. It's from iron in those teeth that make them super tough and able to cut through wood. They have like orange tips and orange like edges to these teeth where they actually have iron along those sharp edges that make them cut
Yeah.
even worse.
I mean, like I said, it sounds like Wolverine. Just Weapon X here. Like that is just. I mean, if it wasn't real, if I was a sailor hearing that, I'd be like, yeah, all right. It's this 10-foot long land crocodile, 400 pounds, venomous with iron teeth. Like, yeah, that's made up. So I mean, just an incredible beast. So that is my very non-scientific description of what a Komodo dragon is. But the thing is, like we've talked quite a bit about what a Komodo dragon is, but there's a lot of things that people think about Komodo dragons, and they kind of come up with that Komodo dragons are not. Like they're not a lot of things, as many things as they are. So, what are some of the myths that kind of surround Komodo dragons?
Well, to start it back, way back, around the time of their discovery a little bit earlier, some of the sailors that were visiting Indonesia and saw these things before anybody, I guess really maybe believed them there. They had some crazy stories they thought of. I mean, I say stories, I probably would have thought the same things. For one, like we were saying, the largest of these Komodo dragons can get 10 feet, 400 pounds. But they didn't know that when they saw them. They were estimating that they could get, and I mean, I say maybe they were estimating, if anybody's ever talked to someone who's seen an alligator outside, it might be like a 4-foot alligator they saw crossing the road, and they're going to tell you it was an 8-foot alligator every time. Yeah. If it was a 3-foot alligator, they're going to tell you it was a 6-foot alligator. Okay. No different with the Komodo dragons. They were telling people that they were 3 meters or 20 feet long. Real life dragons. They had found them, right? And were even exaggerating, saying that these were the monsters. This is where you get the name the Komodo dragon from, right? These were the monsters that we heard about in these tales, and described them as 20-foot fire-breathing lizards.
Yeah. I mean, just like it goes to show the extent of the human imagination. Because like as much as we talk about that as being a myth, I can kind of see I would have said the same thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm known to exaggerate. That's not necessarily like a news break to you. If I came across some giant lizard like that, I might start to imagine things myself on my way out of there, especially if I wasn't educated on reptiles. And especially by the time I made it back to other people, if I thought they had no chance of finding that,
especially back in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
They don't know what's possible back
then.
Take
imagination out of it. You've just spent your whole life hearing these maybe even childhood stories of sea serpents and dragons around the world that can breathe fire. Then you go visit this faraway land, and the locals are telling you, "Oh, we've got them on the next island over."
Yeah.
So you go see them, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, these
things are real."
Yeah, just like in the stories there. And then you have some more recent legends. Kind of the craziest one, there was a lot of speculation that went into how Komodo dragons killed their food. And there's good reason for the speculation. Like we were mentioning about I almost said the Komodo dragon legends there. This is something that is highly revered by the locals inhabiting this area, right? I mean, it would almost be like, it would be a higher reverence than we hold for our bald eagles here in the United States. Imagine if somebody came from some faraway land and say, we want to study your eagles and we want to kill them and bring them back. How many people are going to say, yeah, that's fine? No, you're not. That's our mascot, right? And they held them even higher respect than that.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of kind of guesswork that went along, and maybe a little too much guesswork. What I'm specifically talking about here is the dirty mouth theory. The theory that Komodo dragons killed their prey, not through venom like we now know that they do, that they actually had bits of rotten meat in their gums and stuck in between their teeth that would harbor all these, I think they have counted several different types of bacteria in their mouth, over 50 types of bacteria that once they got into the bloodstream of their victim that they had just mauled, they would run off, become septic, and die sometimes over a week later, and the dragon would track them down and eat them after they died. We now know that is not correct.
Very far from the truth.
Like I said, maybe that was the best guess that they could give at the time. but now, with more sophisticated methods
And
of
if I
studying
could
them.
step in for just a
Yeah,
second,
of course, of course.
there's one thing I'd like to point out, and I want to give credit to Jason Clark. I know he'll probably be listening to this, but I was listening to an interview that he did on the radio, and he kind of brought up a similar point with snakes that I thought was kind of applicable here. People talk about like the bacteria in a snake bite. They think you're going to get like this horrible infection from a snake bite and stuff like that. And something he had kind of pointed out was like, the teeth aren't super close together. Like the teeth for snakes are not designed to rip off chunks and things like that. They're designed to swallow things whole. There's no real room for stuff to get caught up in there. And sure, it's different with the Komodo dragon, but a similar point remains. Their teeth are not like ours. Like ours are very close together. There's little tiny gaps. It's really easy for us to get stuck in our teeth. And I think it's easy to imagine, not to quote the water boy, but if they have no ability to brush their teeth, if you're thinking of them and you don't really understand with their teeth how they really work, you might be thinking of how they quote in the water boy, the alligators are grumpy because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush. They might be thinking the Komodo dragon has all that bacteria in their mouth because they have their tight teeth together, and they're eating this nasty meat that's been rotting and everything. Like they're going to be getting that bacteria built up, all this stuff caught in between their teeth. That's just not really how their teeth work. They don't really have gaps like that the same way that we do. So there's not really this ability to get stuff caught in there in the first place. So even though, they're not brushing their teeth and cleaning their mouths in any way, their mouths definitely aren't clean, but they're nowhere near as dirty as you would think a wild animal would be. It's going to be eating.
I was about to say, please don't misinterpret what we're saying. It's saying that they have very clean mouths. They're a lot cleaner than we used to think that they were. But if for whatever reason, anybody listening to this ever gets bitten by a Komodo dragon, please don't go, nah, I want to refuse medical help. I actually listened to these two guys.
Or if you get bit by any lizard or any monitor for that thing. Yeah.
Any monitor, any lizard, any animal, any person.
Please watch it clean. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was all I was about to say was, please don't refuse medical help and be like, well, I was listening to these two guys in their 20s on the internet saying that actually,
if you refuse medical help for anything we say, survival of the fittest, that's kind of on you. If you're taking our word as medical advice, like there's not a lot of college hours between the two of us here. We're reptile people, but we are not sophisticated people, if you will.
We're not going to be writing any scientific descriptions of new species anytime soon.
Man, I wish.
But the only way we'd get an opportunity to do that is if maybe a new species made its way to America, which is kind of our next point, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, like this animal does have kind of a storied history in North America. And as Luke mentioned, like they started off in Europe. Naturally, Europe's a lot closer to where they'd be from in North America. But only 14 years after they landed in Europe, they made it to the United States as well. In 1926, the first live Komodos arrived in America. After the Burden expedition, the live Komodo dragons were brought to the United States and displayed at the Bronx Zoo, which turned them from just some exotic story into something that Americans could actually see. And I mean, like, I don't know about you, Luke, but like we've kind of grown up in this era of pretty much every reptile. Obviously there's exceptions to this, but most of the like really, really awesome, big, cool animals either are well documented and well known about. We can watch documentaries, see them, whatever, or we've already seen them in a zoo. Like something like when I first got to see Komodo dragons, it was awesome. I still get super excited when I get to see them. Maybe one day I'll get to work with them and that'll reignite that spark all over again. But the era of accessibility is upon us. Like we can find these things in North America now at zoos. We can read up on them. We can watch documentaries on them. Like all the information in the world is at our fingertips. Imagine this for a second. Imagine you are some 9-year-old kid who has fallen in love with reptiles, and you're living in 1926 in New York, and you find out that the Bronx Zoo has a living dragon that you have never heard of. And you go to the zoo and you see a 9-foot long, 295-pound lizard. Like, just insane. I would be hooked. I'd be enamored. Like, that would be life-changing for me.
The only thing I could think of that could like compare or make it relatable would be if a huge discovery was made that there's this small island that there are still some dinosaurs living on.
Yeah. Like that would be weird.
And like then we caught them and brought them to America, and they're on display at the zoo.
Yeah,
You can go
come
see
see
the
a T-Rex
dinosaurs.
in person.
Yeah.
Come see a Baryonyx, which shout out
Mhm.
Baryonyx, the greatest dinosaur. So like if I found out a zoo had a Baryonyx, I'd be losing my mind. Like I would go nuts for this. It just would be insane to me. And just as much as we would get infatuated, America became infatuated with Komodo dragons.
Mhm.
Komodo dragons became associated with the idea of like a living dinosaur, a real life dragon. They were feeding America's fascination with expeditions, lost worlds, giant reptiles, and eventually monster movies, like we talked about. We talked about how they've, been in those movies. In a lot of these movies, King Kong and The Lost World and things like that, kind of came about largely in due to the discovery of this. Because at this point, it kind of seemed like a lot of these large animals were going to be known about. So for this one to be kind of popping up that late into the world's history now, but the world at that time was a really, really big deal. But the thing is, these animals, not a lot was known about them. I mean, like we know how to keep monitors and Komodo dragons well today, but the early American history was basically a lot of struggle. Early zoos struggled to keep them alive significantly. Keeping Komodos successfully was difficult, basically because virtually nothing was known about their specialized husbandry. Their history in American zoos is a good example of how reptile husbandry has developed over the last century, because Komodo dragons are not exactly a difficult animal to keep alive now. We've kind of got all that figured out, but they struggled mightily with keeping alive Komodo dragons in the early days of them being brought into the United States. But in 1992, there was a major breakthrough with Komodo dragons, and that was captive breeding. So the Smithsonian's National Zoo successfully hatched Komodo dragons, demonstrating that zoos outside of Indonesia could successfully reproduce the species in human care. This helped shift them from being animals simply displayed in zoos to animals being managed as conservation populations. So that changed the whole idea around them just being some trophy that you kept alive for a couple years and then died, and then you hoped you could get a new one. It shifted Komodo dragons into being something like, okay, we can breed these things, we can raise them. They're kind of losing a little bit of that crazy monster feel now, and they're a little bit more like, this is a tangible thing we can care for. And that's kind of morphed into today, which now these things are conservation ambassadors. Modern American zoos use Komodo dragons for education, research, conservation, public awareness. A visitor who may never travel to Indonesia can see one in person and learn about the species and its incredibly restricted habitat, and why protecting wild populations matter. Because I think just hearing about them from like the big monster standpoint is really cool, and that's exciting. Like I go watch the Godzilla movies because big monster. Like I'm not looking at that for quality. And I think that's kind of how early Komodo dragons were treated. It was just cool to go see this big monster in a cage and get to see this thing exist. But now it's used as a, hey, you think this is neat? This thing lives in an incredibly restricted habitat that's incredibly fragile and needs to be protected, and it's used as a token to inspire empathy for an environment that's going to also have a lot of other animals that are just as fragile and restricted. So it's really, really cool to see kind of how that history has changed in the United States. And one thing that I think is interesting to me, and I think it kind of is part of changing. Why, man, I'm really
I was about to call you out on it.
What is going on here with my lights, dude? That's a little better, dude. It's like my lights got super.
I think your timers went off on your habitats behind you.
Oh yeah, that's what it is.
Really
Yeah,
washed you out.
I would say it hit 9 o'clock and everything. Oh man, that is crazy. I'm gonna have to like turn my lamp down a little bit here. Okay,
there you go.
Hey, it's a little better.
You don't look as much like a
little
ghost
bit.
now. I just have the one ghost spot here. So yeah.
Sorry about that. But yeah, I'm glad I caught that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's really been many incidents with Komodo dragons in North America, specifically in zoos, just because as far as I know, almost 100% of Komodo dragons are restricted to zoos. I don't think there's very, very few Komodo dragons in the private sector, and so a little bit less incidents to happen there. But the thing is, like, incidents do happen, even though these animals are revered and respected in their natural habitat. Incidents do happen with wild Komodo dragons and the people of like Komodo Island.
I was actually looking this up. There is one that happened at a zoo. A little bit
yeah,
instance there. It's not a fatality there, but it's a kind of a well-known event in June of 2001. So kind of in the summertime there. Phil, I believe his name is Bronstein, the then husband of actress Sharon Stone, and executive editor of cameras are just being weird today.
Yeah.
San Francisco Chronicle was severely bitten by a 7-foot, 150-pound Komodo dragon during a private behind-the-scenes tour at Los Angeles Zoo. He suffered a crushed big toe and severed tendons that required major surgery. Sounds like he got away very lucky.
Yeah.
If I had to pick one body part to get bit by the Komodo dragon, the big toe would be it. If that was the one thing that it was going to take. That was one that, I'll be honest, I didn't even research for tonight. It's not one of my notes. You just said that, and I was like, I've heard of this happening before. Yeah. It's what I tended to have ready on standby for me here are some cases of that happening over in Indonesia. There, some of the surrounding islands. I guess they're all technically a part of Indonesia. And kind of going, we get some crazy reports of that happening. That definitely did happen, dating back maybe mid 1900s, but I picked 3 stories that I thought were the ones to go over, just to kind of keep it a little bit shorter, as well as they're a little bit more recent and a little bit more relative today. 2 fatalities, and then we'll bring it to a story I thought was very interesting at the end that has a little bit of a happier ending there, especially because the first one is it's pretty rough. This is from CBS News on June 5th, 2007. A Komodo dragon attacked and killed an 8-year-old boy in eastern Indonesia. The first recorded deadly attack on a human by one of the giant lizard in 33 years, which is kind of why I decided to start with this one. It kind of picks up a little bit after this. A national park spokesman said Monday the boy was mauled when he went to go to the bathroom behind a bush Saturday on Komodo Island. I can't think of much of a worse time to get bit by a Komodo dragon.
Yeah.
It says the Komodo bit him on his waist and tossed him viciously from side to side. I don't mean to shout out this video. I'm not saying that anybody should go watch it when I say that this reminds me of it, but all I can think of reading this is a very famous video. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was a young Nile monitor in this video that someone was feeding a live mouse to in a horrible setup. Hopefully that was just a feeding tank. But it rushes across this small aquarium, grabs this mouse, and I mean, it just beats it in like a figure eight.
Oh, yeah. Talking about.
That is all I can think of reading this. I mean, that's just one of the most horrific ways I can think of to go.
Yeah.
Someone did attempt to help him. A fisherman who just happened to be the boy's uncle threw rocks at the lizard until it let the boy go and fled. The boy died from massive bleeding half an hour later.
Jeez. Yeah.
That's pretty rough.
That's a pretty grueling one, a gut-wrenching one right there.
Yeah, that might be the most gut-wrenching one. The next one is not much better. This doesn't come from a specific news outlet. There are a ton of them that cover this, but while I was looking through it, honestly, the one that words it best is just kind of the Google overview. It says in March 2009, a 31-year-old Indonesian fruit picker named Muhammad Anwar was mauled and killed by 2 Komodo dragons after falling from a sugar apple tree on Komodo Island. The giant lizards were waiting below and inflicted several severe bite wounds before he bled to death. It says in the event he fell from a sugar apple tree directly near 2 waiting dragons, which attacked and bit his hands, body, legs, and neck, and presumably just ripped him apart.
Yeah.
The outcome was that, funny enough, I guess fishing is very popular over in Komodo. Local fishermen rushed.
Pearl diving. There.
So local fishermen rushed him by boat to a clinic on the neighboring island of Flores, but he was pronounced dead on arrival from severe blood loss. Pretty awful to fall out of a tree.
I gotta say, like, for me, I think it'd be hard for me to draw up a worse way to die because, ironically enough, being as tall as I am terrified of heights. So one, you would not catch me up in that tree. But for me to fall from a tree to then fall and get mauled by Komodo dragons. I mean, like the last episode we talked about with like a man-eating animal, and I know this isn't quite the same, but was the giant snakes. I gotta say, I think I would much rather be constricted.
Oh,
I mean, you
absolutely.
want to talk about like
Absolutely.
losing consciousness long before you die and being choked out. You know, I've done jujitsu and stuff like that before, and I got to say, it losing consciousness from being choked out is not that bad. It's not fun, but it's not the end of the
Well,
world.
I mean, I guess it's important to say that constrictors don't choke you out in the same way of
It's blood.
constriction.
Yeah,
It's blood. So
yeah.
not only is it a bit more violent, but to my knowledge, it's a little bit quicker at
Yeah,
least.
which I mean, that's what happens a lot in jiu-jitsu as well. Not to
Mhm.
get too far into that, but it's usually cutting off blood flow to the brain, and so you lose
Mhm.
consciousness because of that. So it's a very similar way of
Which
it.
begs the question: do snakes even know jujitsu?
Apparently so. I mean, they do some
Sorry.
pretty gnarly blood chokes.
Mhm.
But I mean, like this. I mean, you want to talk about not to get like too graphic and in detail about it, but I mean, like you're going to be alive for a lot of this.
Oh
And I
yeah,
mean, like
until the end. You're not
yeah.
only you're gonna be alive and conscious.
Yeah, you're gonna be
That's
alive.
the
You're alive and conscious until you physically die. And so I mean, like, geez, that is brutal. But sorry, go on.
no. The last one is also pretty horrific, but at least has a happier ending. And this is about a Komodo dragon. Again, thankfully, this man lived to tell the tale. Climbed into someone's house. A Komodo dragon. This is from the Telegram on February 25th, 2009. Wait, what was our last year? All back to back. And this one actually was just a couple months before our last story.
Oh my
A
gosh.
Komodo. So a lot of if you ever watch any videos, I think Brave Wilderness actually just posted a YouTube video where they're looking for the Komodo dragons. If you look, a lot of the houses that people live in, they're kind of elevated off the ground in that area near where the Komodos are. I don't know if it's maybe to prevent stuff like this from happening or for another reason. I'm not sure, but it didn't stop this Komodo dragon. Okay,
Yeah.
Komodo dragon climbed a ladder into a park ranger's hut and mauled his hand and foot, officials say today. The victim received severe lacerations, but appeared to be recovering. The attack on Rinka, one of the 3 islands where the world's largest lizards can be found in the wild, occurred Sunday when the animal entered the hut and lunged at the victim, who was sitting at his desk, said Daniel Gongo, I believe is how that's pronounced, Gongo, a Komodo National Park official. The 46-year-old victim, Maine, screamed for help and jumped onto his desk, clutching the neck of the still snapping reptile. He then let go of the reptile and fled out of the window as colleagues raced to his aid and used wooden sticks to force the dragon out of the hut. Maine, who like many Indonesians uses only one name, received more than 30 stitches, but appeared to be recovering. So it seems like it was kind of a more. I would honestly expect far more stitches than that. Seems like that was kind of a quick event, thankfully. But he lived to tell the tale. But oh my word, can you imagine? I mean, you're at a
You're
desk
going a similar route that I was about to go with
right now at your desk, and you just hear,
oh, just like you just see me lose my mind, and there's a 7-foot Komodo dragon.
That's and it's just thrashing you around the room.
Gosh, I mean, like the other ones definitely seem a lot worse. That one would scare the life out of me. I mean, almost literally, just like just being at your desk inside of what you think is a safe place, and just all of a sudden, like,
and then you're in a hut, you're in basically a small tree house, and this land crocodile climbs in through the window. I don't know the door or what, but oh my goodness, it's kind of ended on a little bit more of a more light. I say more lighthearted. He lived, so more lighthearted.
I know you sent me a video of this when we were getting ready for it. There's that one dude on the Komodo Island who we saw who had been bitten by Komodo dragons like several times, like the thighs and the arms and things like that. I want to know what was going on with that guy. Like, I don't think there's a lot of details about what happened to him. But
in that, here could be a real shout out. In that Brave Wilderness YouTube video, they actually interview him, in person over there. So I would highly, if you're interested in that story, absolutely check out. Such a great channel full of such great people with great content going on there. They actually interview that man's survival story from a Komodo dragon attack that jumped and grabbed him by the thigh, and it looks horrific.
Which how you can survive a Komodo dragon bite to the thigh is beyond me. I mean,
especially with I was about to say the artery there. I'm by no means a anatomy major or anything
Yeah.
like that. Not college guys here again, right? But was it femoral artery, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, that runs through there?
Mhm.
Oh, what a lucky man.
Yeah, I mean, especially like you see that video, he was not a very thick guy. Like he was a pretty slim build guy.
What are you,
I
what are you
mean,
trying
like,
to say?
yeah,
I'm
I'm
just
saying a
playing. I'm
Komodo
just
dragon
playing.
could take you down. Is
Yeah,
what I'm trying to say.
definitely could.
Yeah, he could take me down. But like seeing how it was able to like just, I mean, those scars were ginormous. Like
Oh,
how he survived that.
it looks like it was stuck in a couple of bear traps.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, so I'm sure there were more fatalities and everything from Komodo dragons in history. I mean, like the islanders living with those animals while they revered them and they respected them. I'm sure it happened.
Yeah,
I'm sure
I mean they
there were more
respected
stories.
the one that got in his house to just beat it with some sticks. I assume beat it. It said use wooden sticks to drive it out, and they were like, "Oh, get out of here, get on."
Yeah,
I mean, look at what we do with a dog over here if it bites
yeah,
somebody. It usually gets put down. They didn't even put down the real dragon
yeah.
that climbed into someone's house and bit them.
That's crazy. I mean,
So,
good for
that's
them.
just good.
Good for
Well,
them,
I
I
say
guess.
good for
Yeah.
them. Not only, I mean, I feel like that is the biggest expression of the respect they have for those creatures,
Yeah.
right? It's just, let's get
And
it.
I think it's interesting that you bring that back up too, because that's one of the points I
Mhm.
kind of wanted to get into in our final section here, which not to expose us, but our final section for anyone curious is called "Pointless Rambling About Anything Related." So if you were interested in like the pre-planned content, that's mostly the extent of it. And now we're just going to talk about Komodo dragons for as
Mhm.
long as we want until we're done. But one thing I did want to bring up before we kind of move on to that is the relationship between the people of the Komodo Island and the Komodo dragons has changed drastically. In 1980, there was the creation of Komodo National Park, and that was kind of the beginning of the change of the relationship. They're still revered, they're still respected, all that stuff, great. But what now has happened is because there's a national park, the growth of tourism and conservation regulations have greatly increased. And so modern residents still have a strong cultural connection to the dragons, but the relationship is now more about coexisting
Mhm.
with and protecting a valuable wild animal, while tourism has also made the dragons an important source of income through guiding, crafts, homestays, things like that. So like people can visit and they can stay in houses on the Komodo Island. They have all sorts of like things you can buy from Komodo Island, the crafts that the local people
Oh
make,
yeah.
things like that. And just like the amount of volume of traffic that are brought to the island because of the existence and because of the conservation of those animals has kind of changed the relationship a little bit between the people of Komodo Island and the Komodo dragons. So that's just kind of an interesting shift, kind of, and how that all has changed. But one thing I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit too is I know it's a little bit off topic, but it is something that I think is really neat. So Komodo dragons, obviously the biggest monitor alive today, and this species I'm going to bring up is not necessarily the biggest, but it's the biggest species that I have a lot of experience with, and that is lace monitors.
Mm-hmm.
So lace monitors, fairly similar to Komodo dragon, but significantly more of like your classic monitor build. A little bit more lean. They're arboreal when they're full grown, things like that. But every bit as much of a weapon as a Komodo dragon. Just in my opinion, a little bit prettier and a little bit less cool looking. Just a little bit on prettier side. But obviously an Australian species, not too far away from Indonesia. But these specific ones are very close relative to a super awesome extinct animal. And Luke, do you want to introduce our extinct animal there?
I'm glad you brought that up because something I thought about mentioning them earlier in our podcast, and I thought, it's a little too off topic. We'll probably talk about it later, which maybe backs up some of these ideas that, these things were 20 feet long. Maybe that was just a size exaggeration. Like we said, everybody who sees an alligator, at least that I speak to, usually doubles their size when they estimate it. But we know that there used to be monitor lizards that we were aware of their fossils back in, I believe fossils were known of back then. But the Megalania, the biggest lizard that we know to have ever lived, was huge. It certainly achieved those 20-foot lengths. And so that's where I had a little bit of speculation. I'm just not sure on the exact year that the Megalania fossils were discovered over in Australia, but they might have heard about those and thought, holy crap, they're still alive.
Well, not only were fossils discovered, but this is something I wanted to verify it before going along. Humans lived alongside Megalania.
To my knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, not to your knowledge.
Oh, there you go.
The
Yeah, you
truth.
just Googled it.
So,
yeah.
I Googled it to verify. But
Mhm.
the earliest arrival of humans in Australia existed and coexisted with megalania. I believe there's like ancient, or um, native Australian like drawings and like depictions
Mhm.
of megalania. So like we've talked about Komodo dragon and how crazy that is. Komodo dragons are very athletic and awesome
Mhm.
animals. Um, if you've
And now
ever,
double it.
yeah, well,
Now double
not
it.
only that, but if you've ever, so megalania, the fossil structure and everything cues to them being is physically close to a living monitor today. Its closest relative being a lace monitor. And having worked with lace monitors, one of the things that I've heard about from a lot of people who've also experienced with them, a common theme is everybody just calls them just weapons. They're lightning fast, they can climb. If you handle them, you look like you've been mauled by a bear, and that's with the nice ones. And just like huge teeth. I remember seeing a guy in Australia who got bit by a relatively small lace monitor, and it got him on the knuckle, and like he almost lost his finger from like necrosis, I think is what it was, from like they just like really messing him up and causing a lot of tendon damage.
You say necrosis?
I think it was
You think
necrosis.
maybe the monitor had a little piece of like rotten meat?
Yeah,
in
it
its
probably
claw?
just
I
had
don't
a
know.
little
I'm just
bacteria in
playing.
his teeth.
I'm just playing.
But yeah, so like imagine that, but 20 feet long. Could you imagine the just insanity there would be a 20-foot long lace monitor? The Komodo dragon would look like a children's toy in
Oh yeah.
comparison, because not only would you be able to be ripped apart by this animal could swallow you whole.
Which Komodo
Like,
dragons do. I
yeah,
mean,
they
not the
swallow
people,
their food
thankfully,
whole, just not
but
humans. But
yeah.
like,
If they grab something small enough, they don't even bother ripping off
so
a
just imagine
chunk.
being an ancient native Australian. You're just out there, doing your thing, minding your business, and all of a sudden you hear scurrying in the sand, and that scurrying in the sand gets a little louder and a little louder and turns into a ground shaking footstep. And next thing you know, you are being consumed by a 20-foot long lizard.
Mm-hmm.
What? Like we when we think of things like this, we think of like dinosaurs eating animals like that. We don't think about people dealing with
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, just insanity that would be. So
I
megalania,
mean,
I mean, like one of the coolest
we
animals.
even speculated about that at a job we used to work at together. We got into a side conversation about what would be the scariest animal if it
I
was.
was hoping you'd kind of bring this up. Yeah,
I mean, some people said chicken, some people said praying mantis. I think the one that you and I agreed on would
yeah,
be, could you imagine just like a 10 to 20 foot long bearded dragon?
yeah. A 20-foot long bearded dragon. Because I mean, like bearded dragons, maybe not the scariest animal in the world because they're
No.
pocket sized, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little bit bigger than pocket sized, but they're relatively small animals. But imagine a 20-foot long bearded dragon. I mean, the
That's
head would
basically
be,
what they were dealing with.
yeah, the head would be about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle.
Mhm.
Like that'd be just a humongous animal. And that's not too far off from what these
Mhm.
actual native humans in Australia were dealing with the megalania. Just like, I mean, crazy, crazy animal to be dealing with there. But
Um,
so good.
oh, I had something kind of off topic to say, but I'll see if that was if you had more to say
No,
about
go ahead. Go
giant
ahead.
lizards.
I'm good.
One thing that we didn't talk, we spent a lot of time talking about the kind of the business end of the animal there,
Yeah.
right? The face, the teeth, and all that. One thing we didn't talk about, and I didn't even think of until just now, I was like, I'm going to Google. And according to this, there is no official or exact scientific measurement for this in newtons or in psi. But working with, the lace monitors there, I have a little bit
Yeah.
more experience with large iguanas than I do monitor lizards, but they do something in common. Biting is usually not their first form of defense.
Yeah. No.
They can smack the crap out of you with their tails. And I was kind of
I didn't
wondering,
even think about that.
is there a measurement for it? And no, there is not. They have not studied that on Komodo dragons, but they have been observed fracturing or breaking the legs of large prey items such as deer or goats.
Oh man.
And here's what I thought was crazy. I'm not doing a lot of fact checking in the moment. So, I mean, take this with a grain of salt. This is just a couple things I'm reading on Google. But this says that they actually use that not only defensively, but offensively as well. That they will use that tail sweep. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
They will use that tail sweeping motion to knock prey to the ground before ripping them.
I would definitely be cautious and believing
Yeah, like I said, take that with a grain of salt.
But at the
But I
same
mean,
time, I have seen green tree monitors use their arms to like reach into holes and grab bugs and stuff like
I
that. So like
mean,
I wouldn't put it past them as far as like
no,
a lizard being smart enough to do that. If I was
I was
going
about
to
to
pick a
say,
group,
I think that
monitors would be
yeah,
the group to do that.
absolutely. I think they're widely regarded as the smartest lizards, and some people would argue that they're the smartest reptiles that we know
Yeah.
of. I mean, I might would argue for the wood turtles, but the North American wood turtles specifically, not the Central American. Love them. They're not that smart. Those North American wood turtles, like a monitor in a shell. They're so cool.
I don't know anything about wood turtles, so my brain is like he's just making this up.
Maybe I am. No, I'm just kidding. They're super cool. While we're talking about lizards, I just thought I would show this off. I wore this specifically for the podcast today.
Oh, dude, I should have worn mine. I have that exact same shirt.
You do, don't you?
I should have worn mine. I was actually looking to try and find like a funny shirt or something to wear, but
I try to wear
pretty much every shirt I have is
topic,
just a plain shirt.
But no, I just thought about that with the Komodo dragon getting tail whipped by that would break your leg. Could you imagine a tail whip from a megalania?
Oh my gosh! I mean,
it'd kill you.
Yeah.
It'd kill you in one swipe.
Just disintegrate on impact.
Yeah. That'd be it.
That'd be crazy.
That's about all the things I have to mindlessly ramble about. But
one thing I wanted to kind of bring up on this when we talk about it, the megalania in particular, I'm sure there's minimal validity to this, and it's something I've kind of heard like here and there. So like, I haven't super researched this. There's all the disclaimers out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard people mention that they think megalania might still exist.
Oh yeah.
Be alive.
There are documentaries I think on Monster Quest and other similar shows about.
So I kind of have a hard time with this, and I struggle a little bit with it because it's not quite like Bigfoot. We're like Bigfoot, we don't have any proof of this thing ever existing.
Or do we?
Yeah, or do we? But megalania, we do know existed, and we do know it existed alongside people. So it's much more feasible for this thing to exist. But I'm kind of like, in my mind, I'm thinking of Australia as a pretty well explored space. But I do know they're like I don't know what they're called, but like the deadlands and stuff in Australia, where it's basically like it gets so incredibly hot, and it's just so bone dry out there that like, almost nothing can survive, especially not humans. And when you look at like what monitor lizards like and what like the lace monitors like and stuff like that, like I've seen people who when they take care of their lace monitors, they have basking spots that reach up to like 200 degrees. And now the lace monitors typically aren't using the 200-degree basking spot, but like just goes to show you these animals like it ridiculously hot, significantly hotter than people like. So the feasibility, I would put it not at zero. I wouldn't necessarily say it. I believe in it, but man, do I hope it's true. Because we were talking about like what would be the equivalent of like Komodo dragons, that being exciting for us. If someone found a megalania and I got to see, I would just say 12-foot plus. A 12-foot plus lizard that looked remotely anything like a lace monitor, that'd be good enough for me. I'd be done. I could check out. I'd officially peaked. So, if anyone, not that I think anyone that important would be watching this, but if anyone that important who, has the opportunity to look for megalania out in Australia, if you find it, I don't know, gold star for you. I don't have that much money, so I can't exactly give you money, but gold star, I'd appreciate it. So, but I mean, that'd be crazy as far as like an extinct species being found to, not be extinct. I would lose it finding out megalania still existed. So, I think that's pretty neat. Well, do you have anything else you would like to talk about, or any more ramblings before we close it off?
All I've got.
All right. Well, then we will go ahead and close it off here before we lose too many people in our rambling. But hopefully you guys enjoyed that section at the end. But hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy this episode, please be sure to like the video or like the podcast on Spotify. I don't almost an audio clip. Like the episode on Spotify. Please share with a friend. Being a small page, we are doing this for free. We don't make any money off of this. So if you are interested in seeing a lot more of this, something that would make it a lot easier for us to do would definitely be just sharing the content. Doesn't cost you anything, and it'd be a huge boost to us, and give us a lot more of a reason to keep putting out effort and spending a lot of time that we are spending it in putting these episodes together, and hopefully be able to even allow us to afford better ways of producing this content. So, Louis, thank you for joining us either way. If you've made it this far, appreciate it. And if nobody has told you this today, thank you for watching it. And we love you for watching it with us. So if nobody has told you they love you today, just know we love you. So whether you're watching this morning, evening, or night, have a great one, and we'll see you next time.